What's going on with Boston? Nearly every year we're fed the same story by the media. They're the best team in the league, the title favourites, and will be unbeatable in a 7-game series. But then a ragged group of undrafted players, fueled by the power of friendship, managed to disrupt them almost every time. How have the Miami Heat been so good against the Boston Celtics in recent seasons? Why the big three Celtics were only able to capture one title? And will Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown bring a title home to Boston? All these questions and more will be answered in this video, as we understand why the NBA's most winningest franchise has only won one championship in the last 35 seasons. Boston is tied for the most NBA titles with the Los Angeles Lakers at 17. However, as Laker fans will be quick to point out, these titles came closer to the dawn of time than now. As if we compare titles won from 1980 onwards, it's the Lakers who have the advantage, winning 11 titles compared to the Celtics 4. And if we look at the last 35 years, Boston only have one title to their name, which came in 2008. The big three Boston Celtics were an all-time great team. But how did they only manage to win one ring? Let's find out. In 2007, Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett were number one options on the Sonics and Timberwolves respectively. However, both their teams missed the postseason. Meanwhile, in Boston, they had their worst season maybe in franchise history, finishing last in the Eastern Conference due to Paul Pierce only playing 47 games because of injury and not having that good of a roster to begin with anyway. In the offseason, there were talks about Boston trying to fast-track their rebuilding process. Kevin Garnett had been linked to the Celtics, but didn't want to commit until the roster looked a little better. So Boston traded Delonte West, Wally Szczerbiak, and a pick for the lethal shooter Ray Allen. With the signing of, at that point of time, the greatest shooter in NBA history, Garnett agreed to join the Celtics. Only 3 seasons removed from being the MVP of the league. KG was still playing at an elite level, only now taking slightly fewer shots per game because he had Pierce and Allen as teammates. The Celtics were almost instantly the best team in the NBA, going 66-16 in year 1, making it all the way to the finals, beating Atlanta, Cleveland, and Detroit. The Lakers were the opponent, as Kobe was hungry to win his first title without Shaquille O'Neal. In these finals, Boston were dominant on both sides of the ball, as the defense from KG, along with the scoring of Pierce and Allen, was too overwhelming for the Lakers to handle, as they won in 6 games. From there though, it was anything but smooth sailing, as in the season that followed, a severe knee injury to Kevin Garnett not only fast forwarded his regression, but also put Boston out of the finals picture. However, in the first round, they still managed to beat a young Chicago Bulls team led by Derrick Rose in one of the greatest playoff series of all time. But in the second round, the Dwight Howard Orlando Magic were just too talented, as they not only beat the Celtics but LeBron's Cavs as well. However, Orlando ran up against probably one of the scariest players in NBA history, as in the finals, Kobe and the Lakers were back, and he was never going to lose this series, as he took out all of his past frustrations on the Magic, beating them in only 5 games. Then 2010 rolled around, and the Celtics had a newfound motivation to win a second title. However, in the regular season, they appeared to be at least one step slower, as they were clearly dependent on having everybody healthy to go far in the playoffs, finishing with a 50-win season. Once the playoffs finally came around for Boston, they were still good enough to make it all the way to the finals, beating Miami, Cleveland, and Orlando to play the Lakers again. The finals were actually going well for Boston, making life difficult for Kobe Bryant, keeping his scoring numbers and efficiency down, leading 3 games to 2 heading into Game 6. But then Kendrick Perkins, their center, tore his ACL, and as a result, the Celtics front line was not able to handle Pau Gasol, as the Lakers won Game 6 behind Kobe Bryant's 26-11-3. Game 7 in Los Angeles was one of the most hard-fought physical games of the modern era, as Kobe shot a horrendous 25% from the field, while the Celtics were forced to play Glenn Davis in Perkins' absence. And as a result, Gasol pulled down 18 rebounds, including a huge putback that sealed the deal, as the Lakers avenged 2008 and Kobe won his 5th title. Shortly after this, Ray Allen headed for Miami, which rubbed a lot of his teammates the wrong way. But this would end up being a very smart move for his career, as he'd win 2 titles with the Miami Heat. After a first-round exit to the New York Knicks in 2013, the writing was on the wall, as the Celtics dealt Garnett and Pierce to Brooklyn, in return for a few players, but most importantly, 3 very important first-round draft picks. The first pick was used to draft Marcus Smart, who turned into be a defensive player of the year at the point guard position and a great leader. The second pick was used to select Jaylen Brown, who would ideally become the shooting guard of the future, as the Celtics saw a two-way element to his game that they liked. And then the final pick was used to select Jason Tatum in 2018. However, a lot happened in between this time. First, the Celtics traded for the undersized point guard Isaiah Thomas from the Phoenix Suns, who was just supposed to be an offensive spark, but he became much more than just that. In 2016, he was in the MVP consideration, as he led the Celtics to a 53-win season. However, the success of IT was cut short once he suffered a career career-altering hip injury, taking away a lot of his quickness that allowed him to score inside. Fortunately for the Celtics, Kyrie Irving wanted out of Cleveland, and the Celtics were quick to offer Thomas as the centerpiece in the deal for Irving. And the Cavs, who didn't really know the extent of the hip injury, had no option but to accept this deal. They also managed to pick up All-Star Gordon Hayward, as the Celtics roster coming into 2018 looked lethal. However, this team ends up being one of the greatest what-if teams in NBA history, as after the injuries to both Hayward and Irving, the Celtics would lose to Cleveland in the conference finals. But the absence of Irving and Hayward allowed Tatum and Brown to step up, playing more minutes as the Celtics still forced Cleveland to a Game 7. In his first year, Tatum put up 13 points on 47% shooting, and it was clear that he should have been drafted first overall over Markelle Fultz, who had appeared to forgot how to shoot the basketball with Philadelphia. Even with a core this good, Boston still wouldn't make the finals until the 2022 season. But before that came one of the biggest dramas in NBA history. Irving was headed into free agency, and he assured the Boston crowd that he would sign back, vowing to bring them a championship. But he appeared to have a change of heart, signing with the Nets instead, as he joined Kevin Durant to form a super team in the Eastern Conference. For the Celtics, they moved on to another undersized point guard with Kemba Walker. The 2020 season brought circumstances we couldn't have ever imagined, as the entire league was moved down to Orlando, Florida to play in the bubble. Despite this, the Celtics still finished as the 3 seed and appeared to have the pieces to challenge for a title. The first round sweep of the Sixers was a great start to their run, but the second round was a sign of things to come. The Toronto Raptors, now without Kawhi Leonard, had no business forcing the Celtics to a Game 7, but they did just that. In Game 7, the Celtics scraped out a 5-point win behind 29 points, 12 rebounds, and 7 assists from Jason Tatum. But then the team that Boston has come to know very well, the newly constructed Miami Heat with Jimmy Butler, made their first appearance in the conference finals to face the Celtics. In Game 1, a clutch block from Bam Adebayo and Jason Tatum saw the Heat take a 1-0 series lead, which would extend out to a 3-1 lead. And even though Boston won Game 5, the Heat would go on to win Game 6, eliminating Boston for the first time. Then in 2021, Boston had injuries that saw them fall to the 7th seed in the East, and were eliminated by Brooklyn in the first round. 2022 saw some big changes as the Celtics moved on from Brad Stevens as the coach and replaced him with Ime Udoka. To start the season, the Celtics were healthy, but the team was not playing well, having a record of 26-25, as the fans were far from happy with the team's performance. This prompted Jaylen Brown to post a now infamous tweet. The tweet read, "The energy is about to shift." After the tweet, the Celtics' energy certainly did shift, as Boston embarked on an 8-game winning streak along with a trade bringing in Derek White for Josh Richardson, Romeo Langford, and 2 first-round picks, as now the roster finally looked ready to win a title. To end the regular season, Boston improved to a record of 51-31, good for second in the East, only losing 5 games after the tweet. In the playoffs, the Brooklyn Nets with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving had fallen into the play-in tournament and would face off against Boston again. Coming into the series, many actually favored the Nets, but what everybody had in common was this was going to be a long, hard-fought series. I don't think anybody could have predicted the outcome, as Boston proceeded to sweep the Brooklyn Nets along with a buzzer beater in Game 1 from Jason Tatum, as the Celtics were off to a perfect start for their playoff run. The second round matchup though was a different story, as fresh off of a title, the Milwaukee Bucks were looking to repeat. Fortunately for Boston though, Chris Middleton was injured in the first round series against the Bulls and wouldn't see any court time during the series. However, what was unfortunate was the injury to Robert Williams, which would eventually lead to his departure from Boston. But in the meantime, it was actually a blessing in disguise, as in his absence, the Celtics were forced to play Al Horford at the center. This created the floor spacing that would ultimately play Brook Lopez out of the series and left the Bucks defenseless to the onslaught of 3-pointers that would follow. In an incredible Game 5 victory by the Bucks, Jason Tatum clapped back with 46 points on the road, and then in Game 7, Grant Williams turned into Larry Bird, connecting on 7 3-pointers, setting a new career high at 27 points, as they blew out Milwaukee to make it back to the conference finals to face off against the Miami Heat again. This time, the Heat were favorites to win the series, as they had the 1 seed in the regular season and had beaten them before in the conference finals. But after the Heat fell into a 3-2 hole, it looked like Boston would close it out in Game 6 on their home floor. What followed though was a Jimmy Butler masterclass, putting up 47 points, 9 rebounds, 8 assists on 55% shooting, forcing a Game 7 in Miami. At this point, the Heat were clear favorites to win the series, but the Celtics weren't done yet. In the 7th and deciding game, Boston would upset the Heat, as Butler took one of the most controversial shots in recent memory, taking a fast break 3 instead of driving to the basket on Al Horford. And as a result, the Celtics were headed to their first NBA Finals since 2010. In the Finals, there was no doubt that they were the more talented team than the Golden State Warriors, but it was the mental edge that the Warriors had from winning 3 championships that would prove to be invaluable, even after the Celtics took a 2-1 lead, stealing Game 1 in San Francisco, and then protecting home court in Game 3, you're still dealing with Stephen Curry. In Game 4, Curry exploded for one of the greatest playoff performances of his career. And after this, Boston were never the same, losing 3 straight games as the Warriors closed them out in 6. Jason Tatum would cop the most criticism for the Celtics' loss, as he only averaged 21 points on 36% shooting over the course of the 6-game series. Going into the 2023 season, the Celtics had every right to just run it back, ultimately being only 2 games away from a championship. However, after the Celtics lost their head coach before the season even started, it was off to a rockier start than anticipated. Now the Celtics, without that coach that took them all the way to the finals in only his first season, they would have to replace him. And they decided to keep it in-house as they hired his assistant, Joe Mazzulla. However, during the regular season, this didn't appear to matter, as Boston improved upon that record, winning 57 games, and maybe the most impressive part of the season was the improvement from Tatum, who was averaging 30 points a game, stepping up to be the clear best player on the team. Boston made an impactful trade, bringing in Malcolm Brogdon from the Indiana Pacers to be the 6th man off the bench. He was so good in that role that he would actually win the 6th man of the year and was a huge reason to the Celtics' success, shooting 43% from 3 on nearly 5 attempts a game. Coming into the playoffs, the Celtics were the favorites to come out of the Eastern Conference, and that was made even more apparent when the 1-seeded Bucks lost to the Heat in the first round. However, Celtics fans knew something was up when the Atlanta Hawks pushed them to 6 games. It was yet again another case of the Celtics playing down to that competition, and in the second round, it happened again. With the Philadelphia 76ers coming to town, without Embiid for Game 1, this should have been a win. However, an all-time great performance from James Harden, along with a clutch 3, saw Philadelphia take Game 1. And then in Game 5, they would lose again, falling into a 3-2 hole. And once Game 6 rolled around in Philadelphia, Tatum was having one of the worst games of his career through 3 quarters. He miraculously pulled it together though in the 4th quarter, outscoring the Sixers by himself, putting up 19 4th quarter points. This perfectly set the stage for one of the greatest performances in Celtics franchise history, as in the Game 7 on their home court, Tatum dropped 51 points on the 76ers, sending them home. But meanwhile, the 8-seeded Heat had made it all the way to the conference finals, beating the Knicks in the second round. Jimmy Butler was playing the best basketball of his career, but nobody even gave the Miami Heat a sliver of a chance to beat Boston. And by nobody, I mean nobody, as the media gave the Heat a 3% chance to win the series before the opening tip of Game 1. However, the greatest collapse in NBA history would occur, as the Celtics would lose their first 2 games on their home court and then Game 3 in Miami, as the Heat took a stranglehold on the series, leading 3-0. But then history was nearly made again, as the Celtics won the next 3 games, including a miraculous putback layup at the buzzer by Derek White to force a Game 7 back in Boston. However, the Celtics had used up all their chances, as in the opening possession of Game 7, Tatum rolled his ankle, which effectively ended the series right there, as the Heat cruised back to the NBA Finals. Now in 2024, the Celtics have clearly made some changes, as they traded away Marcus Smart to bring in Kristaps Porzingis, and then after the Damian Lillard trade to the Milwaukee Bucks, they traded Robert Williams and Malcolm Brogdon for Drew Holiday. After these trades, the Celtics became the title favorites, and in the regular season, they did nothing to shake the media's confidence in them, winning 64 games, finishing first in the Eastern Conference. But yet again, the Miami Heat coming through the play-in tournament have made it back to the playoffs, and this time they're playing Boston in the first round. However, without Jimmy Butler, who's out with an MCL sprain and will miss the entire series, the Celtics should be able to pull this one out. However, the Heat were able to win Game 2 to tie the series, but at the point of recording this video, Boston have just blown them out and extended the lead to 2-1. If the Celtics lose this series, or at any point during this playoff run, it will be a failure, and there will be even more dramatic changes this offseason, as Jason Tatum is ready to sign an extension for more money, which in turn will mean Boston won't be able to have as good of a roster that they have right now, especially if Tatum and Brown are both still on the team. Decisions are going to need to be made either way, but if they lose in the Eastern Conference playoffs, maybe it'll then be time to split up Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Do you think that the Boston Celtics are going to be able to win a title with the Jays? And if they lose, should one of them be traded? Let me know in the comments below.